Welcome to the book study on the Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology. We're on Chapter 8, Quality Indicators for Administrator Support of AT. And I'm Kristen Leslie, and we have Linda Daly as well. And so we'll just get started. This chapter can really help administrators recognize the importance of their role, the role they play in establishing and supporting fair, efficient, and cost-effective AT services, and assuring that the law is upheld in districts in relation to AT. Some administrators have designated an AT person or an AT team in the district, and so they may feel like everything's being taken care of by that team or by that person, that things are being addressed. But it's very critical for the administrators to be knowledgeable and informed on how they can support the team and then lead the district in the area of AT. In reality, the AT team is probably, and the IEP teams that are aware of AT are taking care of things, the details of AT services, but the administrators, without their support, the services may not be as efficient and effective. So we really need to have their support, have them setting a vision for the district on AT, setting a direction so that AT can be more effective. Administrators have a lot on their plate, so delegating is part of their job. But in this chapter, we'll look at ways in which the administrator can be informed of their role and their influence for successful AT services. Again, we want to mention the authors of the Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology because they have really raised the standard for AT in the schools nationwide, and they really provide best practices for AT. So we just recognize them again. Each chapter we pull out a quote, and here we have support from administration is absolutely essential for quality AT services to be delivered and sustained. Very true, and we'll see the ways in which the administrators can support AT as we go through the indicators. So in providing this book study, we've noticed that many attending are those who are implementing AT specialists, teachers, therapists, and so we wanted to talk about some tips for gaining administrative support and have you be considering ways in which administrators have supported you previously. And we'd love for you to share that out in the chat as we're going through these indicators, ways in which you've gained administrative support to give others ideas, and for those administrators who are watching this book study can have some ideas too on ways they can support. So as far as gaining administration support, just proving that you are a responsible recommender of AT tools and services, that you've done your research, that you have looked at the options and weighed them out and can provide just good, responsible recommending of AT. And so you prove that over time. You may be inviting the administration to AT meetings, whether that's the statewide meeting that we have or your team meetings within your district or regional meetings. Providing education about IDEA in relation to AT, administrators are all about the law and making sure they are following the law. They're not wanting to have any sort of citizen's complaint. So just raising awareness of AT and IDEA may be helpful. Understanding your administrator's perspective, and knowing what the goals are for the administrator and how the initiatives of the district change each year and the goals that the SPED director's supporting in relation to the district-wide goals. Being informed of that and considering how AT supports those initiatives and goals can show that you are aligned with their perspective. Also sharing success stories to demonstrate how students are using AT successfully, showing how there's data in relation to how AT improves the student's growth. Some administrators are more emotionally driven and connected with those students and the stories. So sharing those out through video can be helpful and bring them on board, while others really want to see that data and the student growth. I would say all of them would like to see the data and the student growth on how that AT is impacting the student's performance. So again, just be considering the ways in which an administrator, in your experience, has positively influenced AT, and share that out as we go on to the indicators and some of the examples. And we'll look at those maybe towards the end, unless they relate to a specific indicator. Today we're looking at the indicators for administrative support for AT services. We're going to consider the administrator's planning form for effective technology supervision and leadership, and then towards the end be looking at the self-examination matrix that helps you evaluate how AT services are doing in your district, how you're doing with the AT services. Let's take a look at some of the resources.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and share my desktop, and then we can look at those resources. So the first one I want to show you actually is not that one. I'm going to show you the guiding documents. So all the information we're getting from the book is actually available on the website. So I just took this from the QIAT.org website and went to the guiding documents, all the information. And you can share that out or that and give a succinct, explanation of it. But what they also have under all of the QIAT and action forms is the Administrator's Planner for Effective Technology Supervision and Leadership. And they start with some research that talks about how principals and administrators can be the change agents for this, and then it actually goes through what would be the role of the principal and administrator, effective technology practices for teachers and students. So you could actually go with this form to one of your administrators, and they give you some suggestions that you would use this in staff discussion of service quality, goal setting, supervision and continuous improvement efforts, monitoring, and progress assessment. So it's a form that you can actually use to really put some through this administrative support. And it's things like for the effective technology leadership for principals and other administrators, principals and teachers have clearly defined shared expectations on the importance of implementing technology, including AT in teaching and learning. Administrators' expectations for technology use, including AT, are communicated across the school year in a variety of ways. Administrators ensure that teachers have equitable access to current technologies, software, appropriate technical support, and the Internet. Reward structures, for example, recognition, opportunities to share, credits towards salary advancement, are in place to support technology in teaching and learning. Administrators ensure that principals know how to access resources to support students who need additional technology assistance. You'll see these reflected in the quality indicators for this session. So you'll see the same terminology and wording and language. And then also this looks at effective technology practice for teachers. Teachers are skilled in the use of technology for preparing and delivering production. Teachers access professional development opportunities to support technology use in teaching and learning. They ensure that technology is available and operational and seek technical assistance in a timely manner. And you can read these for yourself, but I just wanted to show you there's the administrator's role, and then there's the teacher's role, and then there's the student's role. Students regularly use technology, including assistive technology, as required to participate in learning activities, complete assignments, and interact with peers. So it's really a collaborative form that you can use with your administrators to help get this support on all sides of the assistive technology, the administrators, the teachers, and the students. And it's just right there in a form you could actually use if you wanted to hold everyone accountable for their part of using the assistive technology. And then we'll go through the matrices a little later, right, Kristen?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. And then as we're looking at this, there's some common errors that the QIAT leadership actually found as they have done their research. And so some of those errors that we want to avoid and are hoping that this study will help you avoid is if policies and guidelines are developed, they are not known widely enough to assure equitable application by all IEP teams. So remember, we talked about the fact that we need to have it so that everyone has access to it and knows them. So that's, even when the policies and guidelines are developed, sometimes they're not known by everyone. Another common error is that it is not clearly understood that the primary purpose of AT in school settings is to support the implementation of the IEP for the provision of a free, appropriate public education. And another error would be that personnel have been appointed to head AT efforts, but resources to support those efforts have not been allocated. Time, a budget for devices, professional development, time or money, etc. And I think we've all seen or heard of people who have experienced that. Another common error would be AT leadership personnel try to or are expected to do all the AT work and fail to meet expectations. Because as we've talked about, it's not one person doing all the AT. This has to be a team effort across all areas. And then AT services are established, but their effectiveness is never evaluated. So how do we know that they're even being effective if we don't evaluate them? So those are just some of the common errors that we're hoping as people develop more of the QIAT indicators, these common errors won't be in evidence as much.
And you'll notice that the indicators come directly from some of these errors they found. So they established the indicators based on some of these common errors. So indicator one. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Before you go on, Rebecca has a really good comment in the chat line. So she says, our administrator has given us the freedom to explore assistive technology and to collaborate with others across our district, neighboring districts, and across the state. They never say no when we ask or tell them that we are going to a meeting. So that's great to know that that's happening.
Yes, very positive. And I think more and more administrators are coming on board and recognizing the need to support staff in this area. So indicator one, the education agency has written procedural guidelines that ensure equitable access to assistive technology devices and services for students with disabilities if required for a free and appropriate public education. We've heard this theme throughout the chapters as far as having guidelines, and while AT decisions are made by that IEP team on a case-by-case basis, guidelines really outline the steps they need to follow for provision of AT. So that's going to promote consistency of the delivery of AT and ensure that things are legal and ethical and equitable, so that it doesn't matter which school or which program the student's going to, everyone knows the written procedural guidelines. So the quality indicators for AT, as you all have seen, taking the book study, provides many examples of processes and procedures so that districts aren't reinventing the wheel, but can have those in place. Let's hear the example for this indicator.
Okay, Mr. Matson had a third grade student with an IEP who was struggling in several areas of the curriculum, particularly with understanding print materials. He conferred with the student's parents, and it was decided that the student's possible need for AT to support comprehension of print materials should be explored. Mr. Matson looked up the district's procedures for making an AT referral. He used the recommended form, followed the steps, and made the referral according to the procedure outlined in the guidelines.
So having clear procedures. And the next indicator relates to broadly disseminating clearly defined procedures for accessing and providing assistive technology services and supports the implementation of those procedures. So in that example, Mr. Madsen knew where to find the procedures. They were accessible, and at some point someone instructed him on having those procedures. And so, there's turnover from year to year, and folks need to know what those procedures are and how to access them. And that includes staff as well as family members understanding that those procedures exist. So they need to be readily available. Multiple formats may be helpful. But this just gets everybody on the same page of knowing that they're available and are expected to be utilized. All right, let's hear the next example.
Okay. At the beginning of the year, staff members in the Springfield School District received written AT guidelines and verified their receipt. They were also given the web address for the guidelines. The school principal gave magnets with the web address to all staff members in his building. When Mr. Brown joined the faculty in January, one of his colleagues shared the web address with him. Prior to a conference to discuss Johnny's possible AT needs, Mr. Brown provided the web address to Johnny's parents so that they could prepare for a discussion about AT.
So back to this indicator, I have been in a few districts where they have procedures established and even have, a staff site, have a link for staff to access. But then gradually over time, it wasn't maintained. Again, it wasn't disseminated. And then pretty soon, people didn't know about it. So having something in place, there's, in the beginning of the year, policies are gone over about many different things. SPED directors are concerned about getting everybody on the same page about IEP compliance. So it's a good time for those of you kind of leading the charge in AT in your districts to see if you can slide in a little bit of a presentation on what the procedures in your districts are and where they can be found. Indicator 3. The education agency includes appropriate assistive technology responsibilities in written descriptions of job requirements for each position in which activities impact assistive technology services. Often, AT-related knowledge and experience is reflected in positions such as OT positions and PT positions and speech positions. Although, you may have been in situations where some SLPs are uncomfortable with AAC, and that's not written in the job description. So you want to make sure that, depending on the job, that their responsibilities in relation to AT are reflected. And that includes, and very importantly includes, teacher responsibilities. They are often the case managers for the IEP and, of course, are implementing every day the student's IEP. And so having some written requirements in the job description reflecting that they will be implementing assistive technology for academics, needing to have knowledge of assistive technology available for academics would be important, just to set that expectation that that is part of the job. Let's hear the example.
Okay. Ms. Williams, the principal, interviewed Mr. Chiba for a teaching position at Lake Middle School. They reviewed the AT portion of the job description. Job responsibilities included the ability to manage and support AT use for students in that classroom and collaborate with colleagues on the selection, acquisition, and use of AT. Mr. Chiba explained that he had worked in a classroom previously where students used text-to-speech, AAC, and aids for daily living. He talked about lesson plans that he developed that allowed students using AT to participate fully in classroom activities. After the interview, Ms. Williams felt comfortable that Mr. Chiba had the skills required for the job and proceeded to check his references.
So having them written in just prompts us during that consideration, and some of you may have been on hiring teams, and so looking at those requirements and considering those requirements will help us hire those who are more qualified, and also set the tone for the administrators. If we're expecting these qualifications, then we may need to be developing some of these for newer teachers and continued professional development to build skills in these areas. We are kind of bombing through the indicators, but if you have anything to share related to any of these indicators and how your districts are addressing them, not addressing them, feel free to continue to share in the chat window. All right, indicator 4. So the education agency employs personnel with competencies needed to support quality assistive technology services within their primary area of responsibility at all levels of the organization. So not only are these competencies expressed in the job description, but again, the school agency seeks to employ those who have those competencies and who show kind of eagerness to learn in these areas. And administrators who are making these hiring decisions, have the vision of the importance of AT and the activities that support AT for those specific jobs. So they're wanting to retain these knowledgeable personnel and encourage that learning and continued growth. So this is figure 8.1 in the book, looking at components of effective technology used by students. I think this is also reflected in the resource that Linda was sharing. So go ahead, Linda.
So I'll just go ahead and read the components of effective technology used by students, and it will be, you can find it on the website in the guiding documents. And so students regularly use technology, including AT, as required to participate in learning activities, complete assignments, and interact with peers. Students who experience difficulty with reading use technology to access information, acquire knowledge, and demonstrate skills. Students who experience difficulty with writing use technology to demonstrate knowledge and skills. Students who experience difficulty with physical or sensory access to classroom materials use technology to access the curriculum and demonstrate knowledge and skills. If a student experiences difficulty with math, they can use technology to access information and acquire knowledge and demonstrate skills. And it's also the same with students who have difficulty with oral communication. They would be able to use technology to support their communication efforts. So those are the components of effective technology used by students.
We have an example for indicator 4, looking at the personnel with competencies needed to support assistive technology with primary areas of responsibility at all levels of the organization, so that we're employing these types of people. And let's hear the example.
Okay. So during Mr. Edgar's interview for a position in the business department, the administrator asked questions that allowed him to talk about the importance of collaboration across departments. Mr. Edgar gave an example of working with a purchasing agent who knew which AT device vendors were sole sources for purchases, so time was not spent on an unnecessary bidding process. Mr. Edgar offered to work with the appropriate personnel, such as teachers, SLPs, OTs, and AT resource personnel, to create a database of items available from sole source vendors.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. Okay, the indicator 5. The education agency includes assistive technology in the technology planning and budgeting process. So administrators are certainly involved in budget planning, and they can be involved with district level technology planning. And so they can facilitate communication with both IT and curriculum in the process of planning for the year to come, and be considering the budget also in this process. But if they are informed and recognize assistive technology needs of students, then they're in the position to give input, kind of agency-wide input. As planning is taking place, they can provide input. So I feel like the AT specialist and those kind of leading AT can continue to keep the administrator informed so that they're aware of the issues as they plan for the next year, and they're planning budgeting and also giving input to other departments. And so I think keeping them informed allows them to advocate then with other departments. Just have a broader scope of how there's interaction between departments. It's not just this isolated AT piece, and they're in that position to do that. I notice we have something in the chat. As technology changes so quickly, would you want to include in the job description, so we're on that indicator about the job description and including AT, include that staff would continue to build their AT-related skills through professional development supported by district or similar language. That is a wonderful point to make, and that's true, that you'll maintain your skills and grow, and then by having that, the district's kind of committing to allowing for some of that to occur and allowing for a plan in place. We had a whole chapter on professional development in AT. And so, of course, SETC is happy to support administrators in that planning process with considering low-cost and free ways for district staff to maintain their skills in assistive technology. Okay, so let's listen to the example in relation to planning for technology and planning for a budget related to assistive technology.
Okay, Mrs. Doubles, a resource room teacher, is an active member of the School Technology Planning and Budgeting Committee. Her participation increases her understanding of district-wide technology needs and ability to help others understand how universally designed technology is both inclusive and cost-effective. When the Technology Committee acquired interactive boards for every classroom in the building, the special education classrooms were included. The special education director and the technology director collaborated on funding the purchases. Interactive boards were purchased with general technology funds. Special education funds were used to purchase AT needed for specific students to access and use the interactive board.
That's a wonderful example. And I've had questions from administrators asking, well, you know, when does this sort of thing come out of the special ed budget? When does it come out of general ed budget? And then in posing that question to other administrators, it really is not cut and dry. So it's building those relationships and advocating for that the special education classrooms have the technology that everyone else has. They may utilize it in different ways, and they may inform the use of it in general education as well. But the administrator knowing the needs and being aware of technology that is happening in the general education then can help them advocate for all of the students to have the same technology and understand what is more specialized technology that may be coming more out of that special education budget. All right, quality indicator 6. The education agency provides access to ongoing learning opportunities about assistive technology for staff, family, students. And I have not so often seen opportunities for family members unless very individualized implementation across environments where their staff is getting together with families to share how they're using the technology, as well as the family sharing with the staff how they're using technology. But we know that just in this process of implementing assistive technology, we need to have ongoing learning opportunities. That includes those specific cases, but also perhaps more in the vein of keeping up to date, providing those opportunities for staff to keep up to date on assistive technology and both the devices and strategies. Really, if we're expecting those competencies, then we need to be providing support for the ongoing learning. And this may be to SPED staff, but also to general education staff, because the students are students first, not special ed students only. So again, the Special Ed Technology Center has a lot of opportunities in this area, and we've helped many districts kind of customize their professional development in ways that are cost effective. Let's hear the example from the book.
Okay, Bayview School District conducted a needs assessment to identify the knowledge and skills needed by staff and families to improve systemic and student-specific AT services. The needs assessment identified 3 priority areas: accessible instructional materials, AT decision-making, and appropriate documentation. Mrs. Chris, the Director of Special Education, worked with others to identify a variety of internal and external resources that could be used to provide needed information and build identified skills. A comprehensive plan was then developed that used local, regional, and national entities. Workshops, study groups, and individualized support were made available online and in person to staff and family members at a variety of convenient times. Mrs. Chris also provided resources and time for staff to attend the State AT Conference as a means to network and build internal resources.
And I think going back to that professional development chapter and considering the resource available for professional development planning would be really helpful in relation to this indicator, so that you're considering what the needs are and the goals of that professional development. And I want to say again, this is not in isolation for special education. This is that's why the collaboration between general ed and special ed and IT and those planning for professional development district-wide, there needs to be the communication so that that professional development has a broader view. And again, that's why the administrator is so critical in this area. Okay, so indicator 7, the education agency uses a systematic process to evaluate all components of agency-wide assistive technology program. So part of the administrator's role is to oversee that the agency is moving forward and towards best practices. And so this QIAT resource provides a great measuring stick, really, and provides the tools so that districts can evaluate their current status and also their progress. And so they provide the self-examination matrices, and this can highlight strengths and weaknesses within AT services. The information gained from the matrices can then be used to develop and improve AT services within the district. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. Also, this section mentions 3 critical views of AT services that could be addressed as part of evaluation. So one is the effect of effect of AT devices and services on student achievement, AT skills and competencies of the staff, and then the satisfaction of AT service providers as well as parents in relation to AT services in that district. So I thought those were definitely something worth talking about, and looking at the effective AT devices and services on student achievement. That's a big one. When you think about why are we funding this or that, and we look at the improvement of student achievement, that warrants that budget to be allocated to these tools. Let's hear the example.
Okay, and then after I do the example, we have another kind of example in the chat. So,
great.
But the example out of the book, as a part of regular program evaluation activities, the Big Valley School District conducted a comprehensive evaluation of the district's instructional technology services every 3 years. Most recently, the agency made the decision to include its AT services in the evaluation cycle. The data gained from the evaluation demonstrated that when students transitioned from elementary to middle school, achievement decreased disproportionately in comparison to past performance. The QIAT self-evaluation matrices were used to analyze whether AT services could be related to the decrease in achievement. The analysis suggested that the staff in the middle school settings did not have the knowledge and skills needed to support implementation of AT. They needed staff development in both transition planning and implementation of AT. In the past, there were insufficient opportunities for them to learn about AT, and the new professional development plan focused improvement efforts on these identified areas for the next 3 years. And then in the chat it says part of the plan might include multiple opportunities throughout the year to revisit use of district-wide resources, for example, text-to-speech and electronic versions of new curriculum textbooks.
Yes, both great examples. So let's just revisit the resources and take a look at the matrices. Some may just be viewing this section of the book study, and so we want to make sure that you know about the matrices. Okay, do you want me to show where to get these one more time? Oh, sure, that'd be great, Linda. Okay, so I'll share my desktop, and I will just go ahead and take you to the QIAT. So if you go to the QIAT.org, and that's QIAT, which I think we all know that by now, you can go to their resources and go to the resource bank, and then you'll often have to come over to additional resources and go to resource home. And then you'll see the guiding documents, and that's the one that has all of the material that's in each chapter of the book. So in this case, I showed you what was under the guiding document for administrative support, and you can get it in a Word document or a PDF, and I showed you the Word document. And then under QIAT in Action is where you'll find the forms, and so that's where you had the form for Administrator Assistive Technology Planner. Sorry, having a little trouble talking. And again, that's in a Word or a PDF, and I had those pulled up for you both in Word. So here's the guiding document, and you can go down and you'll see that table we showed you is in there. The examples are in there, the key questions, and so you'll have all of that in there. And here was the table we showed you. And then also that was, I just downloaded this version, the Word version, and so there's the form. And then I pulled up the QIAT matrices as the PDF version. So here's the QIAT matrices. So the matrix for quality indicators for administrative support is right here, and it goes, each indicator is listed, and then it talks about unacceptable to promising practices. And so you can actually use that as a tool to do your evaluation. So while I have them up, did you want to say anything more about them, Kristen? No, just showing that they exist, and so that evaluation system or process is already in place as far as moving towards best practice. I have some suggested activities just to print out the resources and perhaps share the guiding document with your administrator, share the planning form and the matrices, and either maybe the consideration guide or the flow chart. If you're a district that does not have any procedures in place, that's a great place to start.